there is no trust. They were put in there without telling anybody. How can you trust somebody that puts something like this under your nose and expect
Did you trust those institutions before this happened?
No, because this is happening all over the country.
Are you nervous about?
We're afraid we're going to be labelled as racist and that we don't like people from different places. But that's not the case. With the fact of the matter is, the facilities we have right now at the minute don't facilitate anybody that's already living here.
I feel very threatened. I'm afraid to go out on my own. My sons won't let me go out on my own.
Ireland is standing at a crossroads, and it's high time to make some tough decisions. The country can no longer afford to be the easygoing neighbor that everyone turns to when Europe's migration issues get too hot to handle. The reality is, the doors are wide open, and asylum seekers are flooding in, pushing the limits of what this small nation can bear. It's not about shutting people out, it's about protecting what makes Ireland, well, Ireland. The island's charm and identity are at risk, stretched thin under the weight of endless goodwill. Charity might begin at home, but it seems like the Irish are being pushed out of their own house.
The Irish state has taken in more refugees than it can house, forcing the government to offer asylum applicants tents and sleeping bags as they arrived in Dublin. Since the Russian invasion, nearly 100,000 Ukrainians have been offered refuge in Ireland.
The government needs to stop dancing around the issue and get serious. Those who sneak in illegally, they should be sent back to where they first landed in the EU. No second chances, no reroutes through back doors. And let's be clear, this isn't about playing the bad guy. It's about survival. Ireland must prioritize its own people, ensuring that the resources that should be supporting Irish families aren't siphoned off by those gaming the system. The message is simple. Ireland isn't Europe's safety net.
I think they're puppets for other powers, the elites, the WHO and, all the rest of it, and possibly even King Charles. Just puppets for somebody else, and they're not caring for our own people.
Meanwhile, over in the UK, there's a similar storm brewing. The country is watching Ireland's steps closely, hoping not to trip on the same stones. British streets, once buzzing with life, are now burdened by the sheer influx of migrants. The social welfare system, once a proud institution, is buckling under the pressure, with long-time residents left in the cold. It's high time the UK woke up and took a firm stance. The government needs to draw a line in the sand and say, enough is enough.
We cannot sustain a huge number, that level of foreign people living within the borders of this country, many of which are living off social welfare because they're being attracted here because of the loose welfare laws and immigration laws of the state.
Look after the Irish!
Thank you very much.
Currently, there are no changes for immigrants already in the country, but the reduced rate of €38.80 applies strictly to new arrivals housed in state facilities. This policy shift is a strategic move to alleviate the financial strain caused by the influx of migrants, which has long burdened Ireland's public resources. This is a strategic move, a signal to potential economic migrants that Ireland isn't here to hand out freebies. There's no more room for those looking to exploit the system, especially when there are 14,000 homeless Irish citizens who could use a hand. The anger is palpable, and it's not just an Irish thing. Across the Irish Sea, many in the UK feel the same way, fed up with watching their own fall by the wayside while resources go elsewhere.
This is Racket Hall, the town's last hotel. It was recently closed to the public in order to accommodate up to 160 asylum seekers. On the 15th of January, the first busload of 17 asylum seekers arrived.
You're selling out your own people, you scumbags! That's what you are! Scumbags!
It included women and children who had to run the gauntlet of angry protesters. It got very ugly.
Step pushing me up.
The Irish government is now fast-tracking asylum applications to prevent abuse of the system and reduce the backlog. By being more selective and requiring concrete evidence of genuine persecution, Ireland is ensuring that its asylum grants are reserved for those truly in need. These measures contrast sharply with the UK's current policies, which many believe are too lenient and slow to adapt. Ireland's approach sends a clear message. Welfare tourism will not be tolerated, and the integrity of national resources must be preserved. Truth is, Ireland's at a bit of a crossroads, and it's safe to say the easy choices are all behind us. The cracks in the system are starting to show, especially in places like Tallaght and Coolock, where the locals are feeling the pinch harder than ever. Services that were already hanging on by a thread are now being pulled even thinner, and folks are pretty fed up. The recent wave of asylum seekers hasn't exactly been met with open arms. In fact, the reception has been more like a bonfire of resentment, with arson and bomb threats now part of the ugly reality. We're talking about over 10,600 asylum applications in just the first half of this year alone, and that's just the warm-up. Figures are set to double by the end of the year, and let's not kid ourselves. These numbers aren't just statistics. They're the tipping point for communities already on the brink. What started as frustration is now spilling into the streets with riots and protests. Sure, some dismiss these as nothing more than racism, but dig a little deeper, and you'll find that others, politicians included, are beginning to see these actions as the desperate cries of communities who've had enough. These people feel railroaded by policies that seem to have been cooked up in some far-off office, with no regard for the actual humans who have to live with the consequences.
But there's many ways to come to Ireland, and if you want to come economically to work here, please apply for a work permit. International protection isn't for that purpose. International protection is for people who are fleeing persecution.
And what's the government's response to all this? Well, it's been about as effective as putting a plaster on a sinking ship. They've promised to crack down on hate crimes, which sounds great on paper, but for the people waiting in line just to get a roof over their heads, these promises ring pretty hollow. There's a growing sense that the voices of regular folks are being drowned out by a government that seems more concerned with ticking boxes on some international obligation checklist than actually listening to the people who have to deal with the fallout. Enter Sinn Féin, who've decided to throw their hat into the ring with a plan that on the surface seems to make a lot more sense. They're pushing for a new immigration policy that doesn't just plop new asylum seeker accommodations down wherever there's a bit of spare land. Instead, they want a proper audit of local services before making any moves, a sort of look before you leap approach that might actually stop the wheels from coming off entirely.
This is a good country. We want to welcome people to our country. The people who have a right to be here, we want to say, yes, you have a right to be here. We want to integrate you, integrate your children, and let you make a contribution to Irish society. But the people who don't have a right to be here, they need to be asked and ensured that they leave much more quickly. And that's what faster processing gives you.
Do we have the ability to do that processing? I mean, we're talking about years heretofore. I mean, how quickly can you process someone so-called, welcome them if they're entitled to be here, or reject them if they're not, and then where do you send them? If they've come via Luxembourg or Belgium or the UK, where do you send them back to if their country of origin is well beyond the EU?
Ireland's in a bit of a mess right now, no two ways about it. But if there's one thing that's become crystal clear, it's that the country needs to find a way to strike a balance. Yes, Ireland has international responsibilities, but those shouldn't come at the cost of destabilizing the communities that are supposed to be doing the welcoming. Maybe, just maybe, this crisis could force some real soul-searching and lead to changes that make sure the country's immigration policies work for everyone. Not just those coming in, but the people already here trying to make a life for themselves. What are your thoughts about it? Let us know in the comments section. For more such videos and hot topics, stay tuned to our channel and don't forget to subscribe.